Hello everybody, it's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game, Fire in the Hood Productions, etc. So today's video is about Savage Kingdoms 4th edition actually. So if you've seen my past videos, particularly my past one, where I've officially announced that we are going forward with SK4E or Savage Kingdoms 4th edition. Very exciting stuff, right? So, this video is about the changes between 3rd edition Savage Kingdoms and 4th edition, at least as it currently stands. We're currently in playtesting right now, but we're I'm probably 97, 98% solid about where the rules will be, so leaving that 2 or 3% for the possible, couple little last moment changes, maybe, but for the most part, the rules are pretty much set. They've done pretty well. We got really good feedback. So I just wanted to do this video to kind of let everybody know about the whatever little changes are going to be. And I say little changes because changes between editions and games, tabletop role-playing games, books, even, for the most part, are fairly minor, but enough of a change to warrant a new edition. So, right. So none of this is like super major. The basic mechanics of Savage Kingdoms is still there. It's pretty much the same as second, first. Like you could grab a 1st edition. That would actually be a little tougher. Never mind, I'll take that back. You could grab a 3rd edition, the current edition of the game, and the upcoming 4th edition core rulebook, and you could pretty much compatible for the most part, other than the few little things that I'm about to go over. So basically I have like 14 points here. I think it's really more like 15 or 16. There's like some sub points in here that I'll try to cover. But I'll try to make this video too long, but at least interesting enough. I do like to do videos that are at least got some substance to it, instead of like TikTok 15 seconders. But then again, the 45 minutes to an hour can get really laborious as well. So we'll try to keep this to, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes. All right. Point number one, the difference is the difference between SK4E as it currently stands and the previous edition. Point number one is you now have +4 in total attributes instead of +3. So I'm going to start with character creation stuff, by the way, just to kind of preface this stuff. So this is a character creation thing. So the meaning behind all of that is that, so in previous editions, your total attributes when you're crafting your character can total no more than +3, right? So whether that's agility +1, physique -1, vigor +3, intellect -2, whatever, all of that has to add up to +3 in previous editions. But now you get 4. You get +4, so it can all add up to +4. So a little tiny power boost. But you'll see as I go on, there's things that kind of counterbalance that. The math is I'm pretty happy with. It's very sweet right now the way it works out. So their PCs have a little, in some ways, slightly extra little power, in some ways not. So it really kind of evens out. But so these changes are mostly just for math and mechanics working together more. Right. So point number 2, when creating, again, this is the first few things are character creation stuff. When crafting a character, you now have a 10-point talent pool instead of a list of favored talents per your race and culture. First, I'll start off with the race slash culture. So in previous editions, you had favored talents, which are still there, and there was a whole list of them. And if you chose one of them during the character creation process, you saved a point, right? It was a point cheaper. That was like the cool way of kind of doing it, to award you to taking something that's more apt to your culture and race. But still leaving you a chance to take other stuff. If you want, you just wouldn't pay the point less. So that's all still there, but now we have like a literal list, like a menu of about, I think it's 25 per race or culture. Somewhere around there, I think it's 25. And one maybe 24, one maybe 26, but anyway, 25. And so you get 10 points to spend on that menu, and if it's an item that's a talent that's in that listing, you pay 1 point less. And it's literally listed in parentheses next to the talent title. And this saves a little bit of back and forth flipping, which was kind of an issue in the previous editions. I got a little feedback on that. Like there was a lot of flipping back and forth, which typically character creation in any game, tabletop role-playing game, you're going to do some of that. So we're trying to minimize it this time with the menu, which is really nice. So you literally can build your character just off the favored talents saving a point per talent. Again, I already totaled for you in the parentheses, so you don't have to go flip into the book and look. Or you still have the option to not choose and use your 10 points on non-favored stuff that's not in the menu or a mix thereof. So it gives you a lot of freedom. Really cool. I'm pretty happy about it. I think it will save some page flipping, and it also gives people that are more used to like a more solid class-based system, because SK is not a class-based system, as you know, but it's not a full skill point, although it mostly is. It's a hybrid system, and that was on purpose. That was kind of my design goal. But if it's people more used to Dungeons and Dragons or stuff that just has like a kind of fairly generic class, you can literally just like take that list of stuff, or at least it gives you inspirations for it. Point 2B would be, so when you get to calling, the calling part of your character creation, which is typically after race/culture, you have another 10-point talent pool for favored talents in there as well, and I think there's 25 per occupation or per calling there as well. The original 2021 callings are back. We might have added one or two more. I'm not sure if Seer and Witch was in there last time. Any case, a calling is kind of like your class, like I said, but not nearly as restrictive. And so you could choose, you could buy talents from that list. Those are favored also, meaning they will cost you 1 point less. Oh, going back to the race culture thing, there's a couple of talents that are actually 2 points less that are very indicative of your culture. For example, a good example is body painting talent for the Kimrethi. I think it's just 1 point, or the base is 3. So you'd actually save 2 points in that case. And there's a few other examples as well, but there's not many of them. Almost all of them are 1 point savings, but like I said, a few of them are 2-pointer savings. Right. So back to calling. And the caveat to what I was talking about, the calling. Some callings give you literally a talent, or at least a choice of 2 that you have to have, and then you still have points left over, like 7 or 8, depending on how expensive that talent you get for free is to choose from. For example, if you choose what's a good one, the priest calling, you get cultist or priest as a free, because that's what you are, as a free talent, and then you make choices within those, because choosing priest, there's all these cool different orders and sects within the Savage Kingdoms setting. As well as cultists has some as well. Not many as choices, because cults are not as they're not as big as like the traditional religions are in the setting. But yeah, so that you get some of that. Right. So yeah, moving on. So point number 3. Okay, bonuses for weaknesses are up to +5 bonus. So all right, so weaknesses, when you get to in your race culture, like we just covered about how you spend talent points for your race culture within that same listing in your cultural listing in the core rulebook, you now get to choose a weakness that has to be. So originally in previous SK, you didn't have to take a weakness at all. Weaknesses are cool, as they give you bonus points to add towards talents or skills at character creation. But more importantly, at least to me, they're better for storytelling. Like every hero needs a weakness or 2 or 3, right? Or else they're just not real, and nobody really believes them. And this is a fairly grounded, I know it's fantasy, but it is a pretty grounded game. It's kind of simulation light, I would call it. So we do try to pay attention to some realism, or quote unquote, or believability, perhaps more than some tabletop, and perhaps even most tabletop role-playing games. So that is like something we're trying to do. Right, so going back to the point for weaknesses. So when you, in your race culture section, when you're building your character, there's a list of weaknesses that you can choose from. You have to choose at least one. So you no longer not have a weakness. I mean, I guess you could, but you just wouldn't get the bonus points. So you have to choose one of them that's very indicative of your race or culture. And then when you get to the calling section, after you choose your talents from calling that we just talked about, you choose a weakness from that calling. Very indicative of that profession, occupation, calling. For example, sorcerer is a good example, because that's darker things like tainted and madness and stuff like that. Assassin and thief might have things like Oathbreaker and Kinslayer and stuff like that as options. So really cool. So the point of these menus are to give, it's for quick choices, but also much into the world building. Like this will help you craft the idea of this culture and this calling, but you still get a lot of choices within that crafting scenario, if that makes any sense. Right. I apologize, by the way, for the weird light things on my face. They're coming through the my desk in this kind of like upstairs office, so to speak. Kind of faces a window, which is really cool. I'm in this little tiny bay window area, and unfortunately, the sunlight at this time of day is coming through the little tiny holes in the blinds, making this strange pattern upon my face. Right. Moving on. So, yeah, you get to choose a weakness, and then when you get to the calling section, you choose a weakness as well. And if you have any points left over, because you can only have up to +5 points worth of weaknesses, you can then choose freely whichever one you want that has nothing to do with your calling or your race or culture. So very cool. But they still can't be more than +5 bonus points worth of weaknesses. All right, moving on. At least one weakness from race, culture, and one from calling. I just literally went over that. That was point number 4. So we already covered that. So that was points 3 and 4, really. Point number 5. Choose a third weakness freely. I feel like I just said that. So yeah, I already went over that. That's the free choice one. So going on to number 6. Number 6, choose 10 skill points from calling listing. Right. So when you get to the calling section, you get 10. It says 10 skill. That's not actually right. Yeah, it's not 10 skill points. That was from an earlier iteration of the playtest rules. Interesting, because I had a skill tier system, and you had 10 skill points to spend. The skill tier, in other words, a skill would cost a number of points to gain a skill level in, either 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on how. Like magical arts, for example, were 3-point skills. Melee and ranged weaponry and brawling was like 2, and endurance, I think, and then some of the others like sailing and sleight of hand, I think, and lockpicking were like 1 point language. But I scrapped that. I think it was a good idea, but it was too much. And the maximum skill level thing per advancement already kind of handles that. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that because I'm kind of off topic. Maybe I'll do a video on a deeper dive into the game mechanics of SK, and I can explain more of that. So, but anyway, so what it really would be, point number 6 is really you get to choose 5. I think it's 5. Yeah, 5 skills from the calling listing. So, for example, the healer calling would have like you get a choice of healing arts level 1 to start with, and herbalism level 1. Those are your options on there. I think in this case, healer literally gives you healing arts level 1, and then you get 4 other choices. So once again, some of the callings will do that automatically. They'll, depending on the calling, like the nomad calling literally gives you the nomad talent, because there's a nomad calling and a nomad talent, because you could be not a nomad in calling but still have the nomad talent, meaning that you've had some nomadic background in your character's history. So yeah, so you get to choose 5 skills. They all start. These are level 1 skills. When we get to the skills, can start up to maximum level of skill level 2, which I'll get to in a second. But I'm just throwing that out right now. All right, point number 7. Choose 4 free skill specialties from race and culture. So in previous editions, the 3rd edition and 2nd, and I think even 1st, so all of them before, you got each human culture, because it's a human-centric setting. That's, in fact, non-humans are optional races in Savage Kingdoms, because it is kind of a sword and sorcery-ish setting. I now market it as Dark Ages fantasy setting, but it's pretty heavily sword and sorcery, which means humanocentric or human-centric, and other races are very exotic and rare, and many of them are dying or don't exist anymore, which I love that trope. But there are options to play strange characters like Darkshi or Lunashi or Chinari or Rathkiri or Jan or Tinku. Those are all still there, if your GM is allowing for non-human races. So each human nationality or race gains 4 free specialties instead of 3 like in past editions. So again, another little boost in power. But it's more really there to express the race and culture in general, as far as world building goes, and giving people something to gnaw their teeth on. A little side note here. I was telling a young game designer the other day. I said that here's a little game design secret. Um, Exclusivity over inclusivity, and then the kid kind of looked at me. I'm like, no, not in the real world sense. We obviously want everyone included in our hobby, but I meant in a world building sense, meaning that um, the way you shunt some things out and bring a few things more into focus better helps you create a culture or a calling or whatever it is you're a religion or whatever it is you're trying to create. Little secret. That's a little side note. That's a little sidebar. Maybe I'll do some videos more on little tricks about world building and stuff like that. Right. So that was number 7. Choose 4 free specialties from race or class or culture instead of the 3 that we had in the past. Number 8. Choose gear from race culture. This is a new thing as well. Well, sort of. So in previous editions, you would choose what was called a cultural item. So you would get, and people really love those. They're almost like the trinkets you get in D&D when your character starts. Everybody, even though they don't really do anything mechanically, they're just a cool storytelling thing and just kind of a neat thing. The SK version was probably even more so because very often they did have kind of a little game mechanic-y benefit to it. So now we've turned it into a whole thing. So when you're in your race culture part of the character building, there's now a menu for items. So instead of only 1, you've got 5 points worth to spend. So an item might cost anywhere from 1 to 2 points. There's a few that are 3. In fact, there might even be one that's a 4-point item. That's like a long ship or something incredible like that. And a 3-pointer would be like maybe an exceptional quality longbow or 50% ownership in a ship or a chariot, something like that. So you have a little menu that you can buy these cool little items that are indicative of your culture. Again, it's all about the world building. Number 9 is very similar. You choose gear from your calling. So when you get to the calling section of character creation, there's a list of items of equipment that you can buy. And in this case, you have 10 points to spend because most of your equipment is going to be defined by your profession, right? Your occupation, your calling, not as much by your race. So you get 10 points there. Items costing, again, between 1 and 3 points typically. I don't think there's any 4-pointers for the calling stuff. So you could start with 10 1-point items, or you could start with 6 2-point items, and then, whatever the others left over for 1-pointers or 1 3. Anyway, you know how the math works. You can get to make some cool choices there. And then you end up with one of the items in everybody in all the callings list is a 0 point. And by the way, there are several items that say, like it lists the point cost. Some that say 0. And it'll say it in the core rule book, but just to throw it out there. That means those are free. You literally can take it. You don't have to spend any points for. One of those items is starting coin, starting money. And that's most callings have 2d20, I think. Yeah. Silver coins that they're starting with. And so with that bonus money that you start with, you can actually buy other additional equipment from the list. So kind of mirroring the thing where you have the favored talents, where you can gain a benefit from getting the cheaper stuff, but you literally can buy whatever. So it's kind of a whole mirror thing. So with those extra coins, what I'm saying, you can buy additional equipment if you want, or you can just save it for traveling money and see what happens. But between race and culture, you generally get a pretty decent base of things to start with, especially when you can consider a lot of the 0 point cost things, which are like basic clothing, cloaks and tunics and breeches and stuff like that, robes and things like that. So, right. So moving on to number 10. If a mage, choose 1 spell per skill level. These are just silly notes I wrote down. Okay, so what that means is if you're a mage, now let me qualify for the Savage Kingdoms. A mage means you are, I know in some game systems it's a class. A mage means literally you are a user of magic. You are a magician. Whether you're a priest, shaman, alchemist that dabbles in some earth magic, you're a mage if you use sorcery or magic. And so you get 1 spell per skill level in a magical art. So let's say for example you start with Fire Mage as a talent. And in order to get Fire Mage as a talent, first of all, the prerequisites are you have to have intellect of at least +0 and willpower of +0, which are average, but you have to have both of those. Meaning that most everyday people really can't do it. I mean, well, they could because it's average, but it takes a lot of time and effort. In fact, those are 8-point talent cost, where most talents are averaging around 3 points. The point being that they represent something that's really hard to learn and very few people master. So every skill goes from skill level 1 to 10, like in the past. Skill levels 1 to 2 are novice skill levels, so no character can start above skill level 2 in any given skill, with the exception of the adept talent. There's a talent now called adept that allows you to start a single skill at maximum skill level 3 if you want, which is now into adept level. So basically you have skill levels 1 to 10. 10 is novice, 1 to 2, 3 and 4 is adept. 5 and 6 is expert, 6 and 7 is master, and 8 and 9, or I think I screwed that up. Every 2 levels of a skill is a category of whatever. It doesn't really mean anything, it's just more of a descriptor. Skill levels 9 and 10 is Grand Mastery. So, right, so, in the case of magic, say if you start with Fire Mage, and you have Magical Arts Fire, skill level 2, you would know 2 fire spells. 2 spells that have to be from the discipline of fire, and they're all listed in the spell list. And a fair amount actually or spells overlap into different disciplines. Like there's a couple spells that are fire and death, a couple that are fire and air. I think there's even a fire and water one, which is really rare. I think it's probably maybe just one that does that because of the diametrically opposed elements for the most part. So yeah. And you can't, so that, you're probably thinking, wow, that's not like a lot of spells that I would start with. Now, granted, it's just one discipline. So if you were to somehow be able to, you have the points to, and you can, I say somehow, you can easily do it. So you want to start with earth and fire magic. And you start with maximum skill level, you start with skill level 2 in both of those. That's 4 spells. They just, 2 of them have to be from the earth discipline, 2 have to be from fire. And again, maybe there's a few that overlap. That could be both. So, and then there's some talents there's a talent called Acolyte, there's a talent called Apprentice, there's a talent called Grimoire, and I think there might be one other, Dabbling Arcanist. They give you bonus spells. So if you really wanted to play like a pretty focused sorcerer mage at the beginning of the game, at character creation, you could start with really as much as 7 spells, which is pretty cool. Actually, I think you could start with 8 if you really tweaked out all of those. So you could start with 8 spells, which is pretty good. Particularly in a game where you can find spells as treasure, and any kind of mage can learn new spells. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where only wizards can learn new spells because they write them down. The other spellcasting classes learn magic in a different way. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on to number 11. Number 11, skill specs are now +2. Oh yeah, this is a big one. Skill specialties are now +2. So in previous editions, a skill specialty is a specialty of a skill, right? So every 3 skill levels in the past, you earned a specialty in that skill. Let's use melee weaponry as the obvious example. Let's say you got 2 skill levels in melee weaponry, and you have a specialty with spears. So whenever you're using a spear to attack with, you have another +2 to your attack roll. Whereas the basic melee weaponry is just whatever the bonus is. So you now get to start with, like I said, 4 free skill specialties. Otherwise, you don't gain a skill specialty until you hit skill level 3. But now you get specialties at skill level 3, 5, 7, and 9. It used to be 3, 6, 9. Now it's 3, 5, 7, 9. Which is kind of cool. It does, opens up a little bit more power to the player characters and gives specialties a little bit more weight. They carry a little bit bigger load in the game system, which I think is better. I think the +1 in the past was fine, but it wasn't really enough. It was hard to justify calling it a specialty when it was only +1. Maybe it should have been called like focus or something. But I think it now, the word specialty now kind of fits when it's a +2 bonus. And just a side note on that, so the math now in Savage Kingdoms 4th edition I think is a lot easier. Most everything goes in a +2, +4, sometimes +6, all the way up to +10 in some cases. Whereas it used to be kind of a +2, +5 kind of pattern. So now everything's in even numbers for the most part. There's still +1s and stuff here and there, obviously, rising one skill level in a skill is technically a +1 to the die roll. But for the most part, things go in 2, 4, 6, and that makes the math, I've noticed the playtesting, much easier. It's much easier to add 2 than it is to do 2 and then 5. For some reason, that's just kind of how the human brain works. A very small matter, but I think it's actually worked out quite well so far. So skill specialties are now +2 instead of +1, like your previous editions. Point number 12, the imploding ones are back. And now we're kind of getting out of character creation stuff, just kind of general game mechanics. The imploding ones are back, meaning that if you played first or second edition Savage Kingdoms, well, Reforged was second edition, but anyway, it's the second edition, 1.5 really, but whatever. Previous editions of, other than third edition, of SK, there was something called an exploding or imploding one, right? So SK is kind of known, sort of. Well, I say known; it's a very small game, but it is within that little tiny microcosm. It is kind of known as the exploding 20 system. So if you roll a natural 20 when you're making a skill roll, remember skill rolls can also be attack roll, like anything that's a skill that you're rolling under, that you're rolling for, even initiative. If you roll a natural 20, you explodes, right? Means you get to roll again, add that raw result to the result from the 20. For example, say you roll a natural 20, you have +5 in whatever skill or whatever you were rolling for. That's 25. You pick up the die, roll again. Oh, I rolled an 8, and that's a 33 total, right? Although you now have the option of taking +10 instead of taking a chance to roll. D20 is fairly swingy, right? So if you want to be more solid, you take the +10. But most people I've seen in playtesting, 90% of the time, they will re-roll because it's a little more exciting, which I totally get. So, but now, just like in first edition, second edition, there's now an imploding 1 system. So the mirror of the bookend, perhaps, of the natural 20, imploding 20 thing or exploding 20 is now the imploding 1. And that means if you roll a natural 1 on a skill roll or any kind of die roll, because in SK it's all D20 based, everything. You now roll the die again, and whatever result is, you subtract from your total from the initial roll. So we'll use our example, like we just did. So you rolled a natural 1, you were +5 in that skill or whatever. That's 6. So and the reroll is a 7. That's -1, meaning that's a critical failure. Any result of 0 or less, in other words, into the negatives, is a critical failure. So as you can probably see, the better you are at something, the less likely you are to critically fail. So kind of excited. I'm kind of bringing it back. A little side note why I got rid of that, because some people have asked, is that I thought I was trying to make SK3 very sleek, and I think I did for the most part. And I thought the imploding 1 system is the lightest. No. Hedging into my face. I thought the imploding 1 system kind of slowed the game down a little bit, but it really doesn't. It only happens 5% of the time. 10% if you're adding the exploding 20 and the imploding 1 together, those things only happen 10% of the time. The other 9% of the time, the game is going on flowing, right? And it only takes like 2 more seconds. So I brought those back. I think people are digging it. It's pretty cool. It's kind of a callback. And probably should have never went away in the first place. But anyway, here we go. All right, a couple more points left. So point number, 28 minutes. Point number 13, advancement is slightly different, the advancement chart. So it used to be when you were in 10 XP, you were at the first advancement. You start at 0 advancement, so I guess 0 level. At 10 XP, you gain the first advancement, meaning that you earn 10 talent points, 10 skill points, +1 to luck. Then the next advancement is 22, then it's 36, and then 52, right? And then 70, and then 90. So that's how the pattern goes now. The previous advancement chart was 10, 20. In other words, it went by 10s, and then it goes to, then 2 of them by 15, and then the next 2 by 20. So it was 10, 20, 35, 50, 70, 90, as you can see. So the math actually catches up the 70, 90 range between the two systems, which is kind of sweet. But anyway, I kind of like the reason I changed to the new one. It's just slightly different because it would happen a lot where people say you got 12 or 13 XP that put you into the first advancement, and now you only have like 7 or 8 to go to the second one. Seemed kind of weird. So now it's 10, 22, 36, like I said. So the first few advancements, it's a little bit. It takes a couple more points to get to the next advancement as compared to the previous edition. But once you get past like advancement 5, it actually is a little bit cheaper. You'll see how the math works out. So pretty happy with it. I think it's pretty cool actually. Point number 14: monsters are a bit tougher. Just wanted to throw that out there, and don't get too. They're not like ridiculously more powerful. Just like little tiny tweaks here and there. Because overall we're going for a fairly gritty. There's that stupid light. Quasi-realistic, grounded sort of game, and particularly supernatural creatures, but even not supernatural creatures, giant animals and warriors with like skill level 8 and battle axe, things like they should be troublesome. They should be challenging to the characters. As much as I like D&D, I've been playing it for thousands of years. It seems like. We all kind of know the flaw of where the game kind of breaks down mathematically somewhat quickly, sadly, and particularly in the new editions, there's not really a lot of challenge. And what I see at the table as a game master, as a dungeon master, is people get lazy. They just kind of hide behind their hit points, and so I've noticed that not only in a darker, grittier game is it more interesting, especially for adults, because you're kind of on the edge of your seat, like, oh my god, what's going to happen? But it makes less lazy role playing and idea coming up withedness. So so it kind of solves two things at once. I'm not quite sure why that hasn't caught on more. But I think most of us kind of know that deep down inside. Make it more challenging, make it more interesting, and less boring, because succeeding all the time is super boring. Although being killed all the time would be super boring as well. But so somewhere in the middle should be the mix, and that's what we're trying to do with Savage Kingdoms 4th edition and the previous editions. Anyway, that's all I got for today. That's my 14, really probably 15 or 16 points. So there's the difference between the upcoming 4th edition and the previous edition. Some cool stuff there, but nothing like super shaky-uppy. So I just made up another word there. All right, well, thanks for hanging in there, guys. Hopefully you made it this far, and I will talk to you again soon.